rice. Check, check, check. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we're cooking up a bacon fried rice, which is one of my favorites to do on a cast iron pan, mainly because you can get a crispier cast iron crispy texture to the rice if you do it on something that retains high heat. So we're going to do, so you'll see over on the cut behind me on the stove, there are actually two different pans that are going to be preheating. We're going to start this over on a wok for a quick flash cook on the flash fry for the wok cook. And then we're going to finish it on a cast iron pan. So we're going to do the last 3 minutes of our cook on a cast iron pan. What that's going to do is something that you can't actually achieve on a wok on a home range, is that we're going to be searing that fried rice so we can get a crispy quality to it. That's something that you can't really do on a home range because you don't have enough heat potential to retain enough heat to get a really good sear, the same way that you would do on a cast iron pan. Sort of the same principle that we use when we sear things like ribeye steaks or New York steaks, pork chops, all of those stuff that have a nice sear to it. Same essential concept as we're going to be using a high heat retaining pan like a cast iron skillet, and then we're going to use it to create a nice crispy quality to our fried rice. So if you have followed these streams before, you'll know that we have definitely done this recipe before. This is one of my favorite fried rices to do. Probably second to the kimchi fried rice, I think. So if you have any questions for me, though, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about fried rice, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least fun to watch. If you haven't already checked it out yet, or if you're watching on Reddit and you don't know what's happening, we also concurrently live stream on the YouTube channel, which is the laptop behind me. That YouTube channel has a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be live streaming. I think that goes back for like maybe 3 weeks now, maybe a little bit more than that now. So you can look up ahead of time when I'm going to be cooking, and then you can, if you're really committed, you can pick up the stuff that you need to cook it, and you can cook with me, which is always more fun to do because then we can talk about all of the things that we messed up, which I do a lot of. So if you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, I highly recommend it. There's lots of fun stuff over there. In addition to the concurrent live stream, that's also where all of the recipe videos live for everything that I cook too. So if you're trying to figure out how to cook the things that I cook, that's a good place to start. Especially because that's where everything lives. Alright, so to start things off, as with pretty much everything that I cook, I feel like I say this at the start of every stream lately, I'm starting off with some crushed and minced garlic, followed by some finely minced ginger. The reason that we start off with these two elements is because they work really, really well as the fundamental elements to everything that has umami to it. So if you're dealing with flavors of umami, you will very, very frequently find that these first two elements that go into your wok fry are garlic and ginger, and that's because they're sort of like the groundwork to everything else that we're going to stack on top of it. That's why, like, if you've ever been to a Chinese grocery store, you will see like huge stacks of garlic and ginger, and that's because pretty much everyone is buying that garlic and ginger because it goes in literally everything that is a Chinese dish that is savory. So if you've ever like been to your Chinese friend's house and seen huge stacks of garlic and ginger, the reason that they have so much garlic and ginger is because it goes into literally everything that they cook. So for my garlic, you will notice that all I did was I crushed it and then I gave it a quick chop, so like a rough chop. And then once you crush your garlic, everything else just sort of falls apart after that because garlic is very, very delicate. With ginger, however, it is a root veggie, which means that we have to do a fine mince in order for it to start coming apart. So I'm starting off with a dice, and then I'm following that up with a fine mince, like so. That ought to do it. If you don't like doing minces, you can also use a microplane at this point. I hate washing microplanes because they're just really annoying things to wash. So I never take my microplane out unless I absolutely have to. So I used soap as hands. That's a great username. I love usernames that it takes me a long time to read it because you have to like focus because that makes them clever. All right. Next up, I'm going with some green onions here, or really, yeah, these are green onions, not chives. We're going with green onions here, and then pretty much every time that I use green onions, actually that's not always true, but almost every time that I use green onions, you will oftentimes see me separating them. So what we're going to do here is separate the whites and the greens of our green onions. This is something that happens very, very frequently when I use green onions. So if you've watched these streams before, you'll know that I do this quite often when I use these. And that's because the two elements of these green onions, they're treated differently because they are very different in texture. So you'll notice that the whites of your green onions, they're a lot more durable. They're like very thick and very durable. Whereas the greens of your green onions, they're more leafy and like delicate. So the green onions are not nearly as capable of withstanding extremely high wok heat as the whites are. So we have to treat these two very differently. So for my whites, I'm going to be slicing these thinly, and then we're going to throw these in with our aromatic elements. So they're going to go in along with our garlic and ginger. Those are going to bloom out some nice aromatic qualities, and then we're going to add them to our wok fry. We're going to use that aromatic quality to sort of bloom out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to save the greens, and then those are going to go into our wok. Those are going to go right on top at the very, very end. So. No sympathy for the least. How's it going? Yeah. Pre-minced or packaged garlic. I have used a good amount of it, mostly because so like early on during like the early stages of COVID, I think around like March or so, at least here in the Bay Area, garlic was for whatever reason very difficult to find for quite a while. If you weren't in Chinatown, so if you were shopping at like Safeway or something, it was pretty tricky to find. So there was a period in time in like March and April where I was cooking with pre-minced garlic. And what I discovered is that it doesn't taste like anything. It literally just there was a point in time where I was using like half a jar of that stuff, and you can't get any flavor out of it. And so the way that they do that stuff is what they're essentially doing is they're boiling it, and then they're mincing it after it's boiled. So they boil the garlic in order to get those skins off really quickly. And then they crush it. I don't think they crush it. I think they just mince it through like some machine. And during that process, all of the allicin from the garlic comes out, and that all leaves behind probably somewhere in the machinery. So that's my theory as to why that stuff doesn't actually taste like anything, is because it's all the allicin has shed out during the machinery process. I have that said though, I have totally on the other hand used pre-peeled garlic, and it seems to work okay as far as I can tell, because essentially what they're doing is they boil that garlic, and then they just like all of the skin just sort of sheds off at that point. And as long as it's not crushed, the allicin in the garlic, so the cell structures of the garlic still stay intact as long as they're not crushing it. So you can actually use like pre-peeled garlic, and I haven't had a problem with it. The only trick is that the pre-peeled garlic is really, really expensive, obviously because it goes through a machine process. And the other thing is that they're a lot more perishable than regular garlic. So regular garlic you can leave. I leave regular, like just whole heads of garlic, cloves of garlic, like sitting like literally out on the countertop, just covered, and I can leave that stuff out for couple weeks at the very least, and it will keep for quite a while. You can't do that with pre-peeled garlic because it will just start to mold. Whereas like cloves of garlic, like a head of garlic, it won't mold. It will just start sprouting though, which is not a problem. You can totally eat sprouted garlic, but you can't eat moldy garlic. That's my experience with it. The other thing that I have also had a little bit of experience with is my mother-in-law. Actually, she pre-peeled. I don't know why she did this, but she peeled and pre-minced a bunch of garlic and ginger, and then she herself stored it in a jar of what I think it was. It might have been like vegetable oil, or maybe it was peanut oil, and then she gave it to me. I don't know why she did this. Maybe she was just bored. But it seemed like it actually kept for quite a while. The garlic I had a little bit more trouble getting flavor out of, but it actually worked for a good while, probably like a couple weeks before it started going. And the ginger kept for a long time. I think like I kept that ginger for several months, and it kept just fine. So if you try and pre-peel or pre-mince that stuff yourself, it actually works great. Good question though. Bacon, yeah. Canadian turkey or chicken, yeah. Today, good question. Today, inevitably, that's also a good username. I love the good usernames. I love clever usernames. Good question. Today we're using thick cut bacon. Pretty much any time that you see me using bacon, I'm pretty much always using thick cut bacon. For a very specific reason, and we can actually show you in a second. But the reason that I love thick cut bacon is because thick cut bacon has a whole lot more fat to it. So here's our bacon right now. It's just set aside. I'm not going to touch it because it's raw. But all of this white stuff going on in that bacon, that's all fat. So all of that fat, if you were eating like bacon for breakfast with like hash browns and eggs, that's probably going to be a little bit of a problem because most of that fat is probably stuff that you don't really want to eat because it's like, I guess it's bad for you, but also it's just like not as, probably not as tasty to eat or bite into as it would be the meat of the bacon. But when we're using it in cooking though, that raw fat or that really thick fat cap in the bacon is super useful because it renders into a liquid form of fat. So whenever I'm cooking with bacon, I'm usually using thick cut bacon because it has more of that fat to it. So you can render that bacon fat, which is what we're going to do, and then you can cook in it. So very, very often when you see me using bacon, that's what I'm doing is not actually going after like the protein elements of bacon. What I'm actually going after is all of the fat. So that's like my favorite quality about bacon is when it has a lot of fat to it. Slow internet. I'm going to plug the internet in real quick. Helps. All right, so I noticed that my internet is really slow, so I'm gonna plug the hard line in. Did that work? I think we're still live. Cool. Now we have a hard line. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, I think that's working. You can get botulism from garlic and oil. I had not heard that. I didn't have it for very long. I had it for like a week or two. But it seemed like it worked though. I've never personally tried it myself. Yeah, and also botulism probably only comes if you can it in oil. I think she had just like given me a jar of it. Sneaky Turtle Trex, how's it going? Yeah, hello everyone just tuning in. Hello everyone tuning in just now. My name is Wesley, this is Wu Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here streaming Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. So If you haven't caught one of these streams before, they're happening almost every weekday now, which is super fun. Today we're cooking up a crispy bacon fried rice that I love doing on a cast iron pan. So you'll notice behind me, I think you can see it in the cameras, behind me there's actually two pans going on right now. So I have a wok on my main burner, and on my side burner is my cast iron pan. My still cameras, I guess the still cameras are on. Only on one camera though. So I have two pans that are going to be preheating today. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to start our cook in the wok. So we're going to wok fry for the first half. And then as soon as we're done cooking in the wok, so we're going to get all of those smoky qualities from our wok cook. And then we're going to pull it out and then add it to our stir fry, or add it to our cast iron pan after that. We're going to get a nice sear from it after that point. Did this crash? I think this just crashed. Let's restart it. Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to start this in our wok, and then we're going to move it over to our cast iron pan after that. And that's going to give us that nice crispy sear that you get from cast iron pans. Maybe I shouldn't have hardlined it. Maybe that was my fault. That might have been my fault. I love doing this process in two separate pans because you can get that nice wok fry in the wok. So we have those nice smoky qualities from the wok, and then we can get that nice sear from the high heat retention of the cast iron pan. So you can't get quite the same sear in a wok because a wok won't retain as much heat, especially not on a home range where you don't have the same amount of heat potential. So we're going to do that in two steps today. We're going to do the first step in our wok fry and then the second step in our cast iron pan. And then we're going to do that nice, we're going to get a really nice crispy finish at the very end. So that should be pretty interesting. Right now what we're doing is chopping up our veggies. So this is my carrots going in first, or chopping up first. We want these pretty small. We don't need to do anything super fancy, but I am going for a relatively small dice here. What's most important about your carrots in a fried rice is that they are cut consistently in the same shape and size. If they are inconsistently cut in shape and size, then we're going to come up or end up with a pretty inconsistent cook time too, because wok cooking, it's all about prep, making sure that everything is cut evenly. Because it spends so little time in the wok, so we have to make sure that everything is evenly chopped in order to make sure that everything is evenly cooked too. There it is. The last thing that we're going to do, I've also done this quite often with frozen peas and carrots too. Super often you will find that fried rices are done with frozen veggies, and the reason that frozen veggies are used so often in fried rices is because they defrost in the wok cook. So what we're going to do is today I'm going to be using some frozen peas in particular, and what we're going to do is we're going to throw those in while they're still frozen. So I'm actually not going to defrost the peas, and those are going to defrost in the wok. So while the wok is cooking, they're going to defrost in there. So they're going to go in straight into the wok while still frozen. And what happens is when you throw a frozen veggie into a hot wok cook, is that it becomes defrosted and it will start coming apart during the wok cook. So we're going to turn off the fire and then throw them in at the very end. And that's how we are able to retain a nice crispy quality to our peas. Otherwise, if you throw in like cooked peas, or especially if you use canned peas for this purpose, you're going to end up with mushy peas, which is never attractive. All right. As for carrots, though, I have tended to just use fresh carrots, mainly because I almost always have fresh carrots on hand. So that's probably the main reason why I use fresh carrots a lot. But also because they're more durable as a veggie, so they don't seem to like fall apart quite as much in the wok fry, which I don't think would be the same if we tried to use canned peas. Actually, I have definitely used canned peas many times, and I can say with complete certainty that they totally fall apart in a wok fry because they're so mushy. Alright, so that's our carrots. So we're going to set these aside. They're going to go into our wok fry shortly after the bacon. Yeah, let's do our sauce next. Alright. Next up, before I get on to my raw meat, we're going to start assembling our sauce for our wok cook. If you've followed these streams before, you'll know that I very, very frequently will assemble the sauces for my wok cooks off heat beforehand, because it gives us an opportunity to taste things before we start cooking. If you have ever watched like street chefs or restaurant chefs cook stuff before, you'll know that super often those wok chefs, they will just throw stuff straight into the wok, and they'll literally use a soup spoon and just ladle that stuff straight in, which is crazy because I don't know how they're possibly measuring what that is going to actually taste like if you're literally just dumping a soup spoon worth of sauce into it. How do you know what it tastes like? And I think the main reason that they're able to do that is because they're cooking literally the same thing probably 20-30 times a day, every day for 5-6 days a week. So they know exactly what it's going to taste like because they've cooked it so many times. For us though, especially on a home cook, I don't make this 10 to 15 times a day. I've probably made this a lot of times, probably maybe a dozen or so times now. But I have not made it enough times to be able to just cook it without tasting. So what I like doing is assembling these sauces off heat beforehand so that we can have the opportunity to stop and taste it. And then we can taste and decide, does this need more salt? Does this need more sugar? What does it need? Add what we think it needs. And adjust. We can adjust for seasoning, which we would not be able to do if we were going straight into the wok. So going into my sauce, that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce plus 2 tablespoons of hoisin sauce. And finally is going to be 2 tablespoons of sambal olek, which I have found is one of the most important ingredients in this fried rice, is because it's where all of that heat will come from, is from the sambal olek. And then we're going to give this a mix and taste it. Always taste your sauces. What does it need? And adjust. I know already that mine is going to need some salt. It also needs a little bit more hoisin. Add one more thing. I'm kind of going off book right now, but I'm also going to add a single tablespoon of rice vinegar, because as I'm tasting this, I'm noticing that it needs a little bit more brightness than it has, and I think that rice vinegar is going to do quite a few favors for us. Yeah, that's it. That's what we need. All right, so I'm going to set this aside, and then we're going to get to our raw meats next. Ooh, the music is too loud. I can absolutely do that. Let's see. All right. Thank you for pointing that out. I don't have any monitors on, so if something is off, please tell me. I also don't know if the mics are crapping out, which if you're watching on Reddit, the mics crap out all the time. So if you notice something's weird, please tell me. All right, next up, we're moving on to our raw meats here. So I'm starting off with my bacon, which is, I think maybe this is probably the most important quality to our fried rice. Is because, so you'll notice, I mentioned this earlier as well, but my bacon, it has a whole bunch of fat to it. So this is thick cut bacon. and this thick cut bacon, it has all of this white element right here. All of this is fat. So if we were cooking this bacon for breakfast, you might have found that if you were eating this bacon for breakfast, it might have been a little bit of a problem because all of this fat is not stuff that most people want to eat when they're eating bacon for breakfast. It's because you don't want to just eat huge chunks of bacon fat. But when we're cooking, though, it is super, super useful because we can render that fat into rendered bacon fat, and then we're going to cook in that fat. So I'm chopping this up. We're going for a relatively fine mince here, or fine dice here, or small dice, I guess you could call it. What we want to do here is we're trying to make sure that we have the smallest bite of bacon as possible. So we don't want huge bits of bacon going on in our fried rice. All of those large bites of protein, those are going to come from our chicken, which we're going to add next. Which means that our bacon can be pretty small here because mainly what we're going for is rendered fat rather than bacon bits. So I'm slicing it relatively thin, or about as small as I can get it. Alright. And that ought to do it. So we're going to set this aside, and that's going to go into our pan very first. Alright, last up, or not last, but next to last is going to be our chicken breast. I've gone back and forth on what kind of chicken to use for this particular fried rice. I have definitely done this, I have actually totally done this fried rice without chicken at all. I've done it with tofu, I've done it with chicken thigh. I've ultimately have landed on the use of chicken breast here because I think that it gives us, or it is a little bit more crisp, or like punchy, and we can get like more of a crisp and like seared quality to it, which you would not be able to do quite as well with the chicken thigh. So I also think that chicken thigh tends to add a little bit more fat than we need because we're already incorporating quite a bit of fat from the bacon. So we don't need quite as much fat in this case. But ultimately, I think use whatever you have. If you have chicken thigh and not chicken breast, use the chicken thigh and it'll be just fine. So more important than what type of meat, though, is how we cut it. So you'll notice that I'm cutting my chicken breast relatively thin here. We want pretty thin bits of chicken because we want it to be bite-sized enough that it will match the other bites that we're eating with the rice and the bacon. So super, super important. You will also, whenever you're working with chicken breast, you'll notice that chicken breast is very unusually sized, so it is pointed at the end. It's generally like a little bit thicker on the one side, a little bit thinner on the bottom side. So we want to make sure that we put some effort into making sure that our chicken breast is cut evenly. Otherwise, we're going to have an uneven cook here. So super, super important anytime that you're cooking. The first thing that we want to do is make sure that all of our prep work is chopped evenly. So we want to make sure that everything is chopped evenly before we start cooking, because an even cut equals an even cook. An uneven cut equals an uneven cook. Hermina, yeah, good to see you too. Yeah, hello to everyone tuning in on YouTube too. How's it going? How do I know when to use chicken thigh versus chicken breast? I think ultimately it ends up, for me, very, very frequently, it comes down to like what are the qualities that you're looking for, and that's sort of like something. Actually, that's something that I talk a lot about in a lot of the recipe videos, because we like a lot of those videos, they sort of break down what I'm doing or like why I do certain things in a recipe video. So very, very often when I come across a recipe that is already very fat heavy, you will see me using chicken breast instead of chicken thigh. Because chicken thigh has quite a bit of fat in it already, and that's just because the nature of the thigh from the chicken has more fat in it, which means that when you cook that chicken thigh, a lot of fat is going to render out, and then you're going to end up with a lot of fat in your stir fry, which in some cases ends up working out because or like should say in a lot of cases that ends up working out really well, because you actually want that fat because it's where all of the flavor is going to come from. Whereas in other recipes, very, very often, if your recipe has quite a bit of fat in it already, that might not necessarily be a good thing because it's going to result in like a heavier and more oily stir fry because of all of the fat content. So for example, today we're using a lot of bacon fat. So we just finished chopping up our bacon fat. So this bacon, it has quite a bit of fat in it. Everything that's white in this bacon, that's all fat. All of that fat is going to go into our stir fry, and it's going to be really, really flavorful because bacon fat is delicious. What that also means, though, is that if you have more chicken fat in your stir fry, in addition to the bacon fat, then you're going to have a really, really oily stir fry, which I have totally done before. It will ultimately work out because if you have too much fat, you can just drain out some of that fat, and kind of like you can just throw the chicken fat away if you want to. But ultimately, if it comes down to it, and if you have both, what will work out best is if you just don't introduce that extra fat. So if we leave, just don't have as much extra fat, and we use a leaner cut of meat like chicken breast, then you can get a more lean and like less oily stir fry. But also, like, there are definitely other situations. So like when I cook like pad see ew, for example. In pad see ew, I very, very frequently, you will see me using chicken thigh. Whenever I have it, at least I'll use chicken thigh. And that happens because in a pad see ew, there's not a lot of other fats that are going on. Pretty much the only source of fat and protein comes from the chicken, which means that that's the only opportunity that we're going to have to impart some kind of fat. So I love using chicken thigh in that case because we're going to get a little bit more fat and like a little bit more richness out of it too. So it really just comes down to like, what do you think the recipe calls for? Does it need fat, or are there other sources of it coming from somewhere else? Cool. Good question though. All right. So for our chicken, I'm going to give this a quick marinade. We're not going to do anything super fancy here, but I'm going to give it, this is going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. And a pinch of kosher salt, and that should be everything that we need. And that's it for our marinade. I'm not going to go super fancy here because we're also already getting quite a bit of richness from our bacon, so I don't actually think that we need too much here. If you're really committed, this marinade should at least go for 30 minutes, and that's going to really get a lot of like depth of flavor from the marinade. I'm not going to go for 30 minutes. This probably will go for maybe 10-15 minutes tops. But that will still do quite a bit of work for us already. All right, is that it for chopping? I think that's it for chopping. Last up, before we start cooking, I'm going to whisk up some eggs here. And these are going to be the last 2 things that go into our stir fry. Last 2? Not quite last 2, I should take that back. These are going to go in somewhere in the middle. In a fried rice in particular, I love adding the eggs a little bit earlier because that's how you get those nice curds of eggs. So if you've ever had a fried rice and there are like nice bits of scrambled egg dispersed throughout the fried rice, that's how you do it, is you add it a little bit earlier. So we're going to clear some space in our wok, and then we're going to add that egg in that cleared space. And in that space, that's where all of the egg is going to start scrambling, and then we're going to start combining it. So super, super important. Unlike, so I think this was yesterday, 2 days ago, we cooked a pad see ew. And super, super often in a pad see ew, you will see, this is actually true for probably most Thai noodles, anytime that you see rice noodles really, is there will be egg incorporated, but it's treated very differently. So we're going to, in those scenarios, you add the egg super, super late, so it's literally the last thing that you add into that stir fry. So what happens when you add egg that late, once everything is already in the wok, is that it coats everything in that egg. So, and that's the quality that we associate with Thai noodles, is that like everything is coated in egg. So we have egg-coated rice noodles. That's what pad Thai is. That's what pad see ew is. Drunken noodles. All of those things. Those are all egg-coated rice noodles. In a fried rice, we are going to do literally the exact opposite of that. So instead of adding it super late and coating everything in egg, we're going to add it really, really early, and then we're going to add it while the pan is relatively empty. And then we have that opportunity to develop egg curds. So That's our egg. Yeah. Hopefully this camera turned on. It did. All right. So over on the stove, I have my cast iron pan. It is iced cold, and I'm adding my bacon to the pan, and we're going to start off by rendering our bacon fat. So the pan is very cold. It's ice cold, and then I'm going to turn on the fire, and we're going to let that come up to temperature with the bacon in the pan. And as that pan comes up to temperature, you will notice that the bacon will also come up to temperature and start rendering out fat with it. So what we're looking for is that liquefied form of bacon at the bottom of our pan. That will probably take, I don't know, about 5 minutes. Cast iron pan, that's the quality that's super important about cast iron pans, is that they heat up very slowly because they are so thick. So the same quality about a cast iron pan that causes it to retain heat quite a lot is the same quality that causes cast iron pans to heat up very slowly. So they heat up very slowly and they cool down very slowly. And that's going to be really important to our sear today, because we want that pan to retain as much heat as possible in order to develop that sear. What it also provides when you're rendering fat is a really nice timing opportunity. So what it's essentially going to do is, because that cast iron pan takes so long to heat up, we can also use that slow heat up time to render out bacon fat. So while it's heating up, over that course of the next 5 minutes, we're going to start seeing all of that white bit of bacon. It's going to start rendering into rendered bacon fat, and that's all of the fat that we're going to be using to cook it. Let's watch some bacon cook. There it is. So we're going to let this go. This will probably take about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that. Maybe less than that. Yeah, and then we're going to let that render out, and then what we're going to do is we're going to remove all of the solids from our bacon. We're going to set the solids aside, and then we're going to cook in the rendered bacon fat. So we're going to add that rendered bacon fat to our wok fry, and we're going to move over to our wok from there, cooking that bacon fat on the wok, and then move it back to the cast iron pan at the very end, and use the cast iron pan to develop a nice crispy sear. So in the way that I look at it is the cast iron pan operates very similarly to the way that you use a cast iron pan when you're doing steak sears. So anytime that you cook like a New York strip steak or a ribeye steak or a pork chop, what we like doing is we love putting those steaks on the cast iron pan and then let it sit there for a full like 3 or 4 minutes. And sit during that process of time where you're literally not moving that pan for a full 3 minutes. That's how you develop that nice crispy sear. It's just by leaving it sit there for a full couple of minutes. There we go. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. And new recipe videos, those are coming out every Friday over on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, there's a YouTube channel that's at the bottom of the screen. That's where a lot of other folks are already watching. On the YouTube channel, that's also where the live stream schedule lives. So if you want to find out what I'm going to be cooking next, that all lives over on the YouTube channel, where you'll find lots of fun content, including the schedule for everything that I cook. So if you're watching over on YouTube, you probably would have known, I think at least 2 or 3 weeks ago, that I would be cooking this today. In addition to that schedule, that's also where all of the recipe videos live. So every Friday we've got a new recipe video out. The recipe video for this fried rice, I think this is a really early one. I think it was out sometime mid last year. In those recipe videos, they generally move a little bit slower, and we kind of like talk our way through some of the decision making that goes behind the things that I'm doing, and like why I add certain stuff, why I leave some stuff out, things like that. Always very interesting to kind of dive into some of the decision making behind what I do in a recipe video. There's a couple of series that are going on in those videos. We have a whole series that is dedicated to just reproducing stuff from TV and film. There's another fun series where I've been doing stuff from restaurants here in the San Francisco Bay Area, so reproducing a lot of foods from the local restaurant scene here in town. There's another fun series that lots of people like, which is the one where I like to deconstruct a lot of Chinese American classics. So taking apart a lot of stuff from places like Panda Express, P.F. Chang's, things like that, and kind of like taking a look at what are the American qualities about Chinese American food, and like what makes those things so American, and sort of taking a look at like what would happen if we were to reimagine Chinese American food without the American qualities, which is always super fun to do with things like Panda Express dishes, because a lot of those things are not really Chinese at all. They're pretty much just American food. So if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. And if you haven't yet, definitely hop over to the YouTube and checking out what's going on over there. Lots of fun stuff. All right, over on the stove, you'll notice that my pan has rendered quite a bit of bacon fat. So at the bottom of my pan, there is a whole lot of liquid fat rendering here. It's about 2 tablespoons worth now. If we let this go for another minute or two, that will render into probably another couple of tablespoons of bacon fat. And then what we're going to do is we're going to separate those solids and liquids, and then set the solids aside until the very, very end. And then we're going to add the liquid bacon fat to our wok fry, and we're going to cook in it. All right. Yeah, let's watch some bacon cook. Alright, so over the process of letting this pan heat up, so I haven't done anything about monitoring this heat. All I did was turn the fire on high and just let the pan regulate its own temperature. And just purely by the fact that cast iron pans take a really long time to heat up, it's doing its own heat regulation for me. So by letting that pan heat up as it naturally would, it usually takes a cast iron pan about 5 minutes to come up to temperature. During those 5 minutes, that's when all of the bacon fat is going to render out. The reason that we have to use a cast iron pan for this process instead of a wok is because if you were to do this in a wok heats up really, really fast. So a wok would probably be at temperature within like 45 seconds. You would probably reach like cooking temperature, which is a big problem if you're trying to render bacon fat, because bacon fat, it takes time. We have to let that bacon fat render out over the course of a couple of minutes. If you do it too fast, what you'll end up with is not rendered bacon fat. You'll just have burnt bacon, which is never good. We're right on the cusp of burning this too. All right. All right, so I'm taking out the solids of my bacon here. Just the solids though, so we're leaving that liquid behind. Very quickly, because some of this is burning. What we're going to do is we're going to set these solids aside. These are going to go into our fried rice at the very, very end. Not quite burnt. Almost burnt, but not quite. Alright, so I'm setting my bacon solids aside, and then what we're going to do is so you can see at the bottom of my cast iron pan there is all of this liquid fat here, so that's all really, really important. We're going to use that to cook in. So in lieu of, we're probably still going to need to use a little bit of vegetable oil to bolster it up, because this isn't quite enough bacon fat to cook in. But a lot of the cooking fat that we're going to be cooking in today is just going to be this bacon fat. Yeah, burnt bacon is still good. Burnt bacon is still bacon, if I'm being honest. Alright, so I'm switching over to my wok here. We're going to start heating this up. You will notice that that wok is going to heat up way faster than the cast iron pan. It will probably be up to temperature within, I don't know, maybe a minute, maybe a little bit more than that. That's because woks are so thin. So a wok has a property about it is that it's much, much thinner than a cast iron pan, which allows it to heat up very, very quickly. What that also means, though, is because it heats up so quickly, it also will cool down very quickly. So as it cools down, as we add things to the wok, it is also going to start cooling down quite quickly. So we want to regulate the heat of our wok very closely and make sure that we don't overload it. which you don't have to worry about in a cast iron pan because it is so thick. Yeah. Bing bong is for, yeah, how's it going, everyone? Hello, everyone just tuning in, by the way. My name is Wesley, this is Wu Can Cook. If you haven't checked out the YouTube yet, lots of people are watching over there already. We're working our way to a 2,300 subscriber goal by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, hop over to YouTube, check out what's going on. If you're already on YouTube, yeah, what's up, David? How's it going? If you're already on YouTube, welcome to the YouTube channel. There's lots of fun stuff going on over there too, including nicer cameras. We have new cameras. I am better framing too. Yeah. What am I drinking? Oh yeah, David, what am I drinking? Today I'm drinking Sagamore Rye. So I'm actually not drinking scotch, but it's still whiskey. But most of the time when I'm drinking something brown, it's probably scotch. Alright, so I'm bringing my wok up to temperature. At this point, you also want to make sure that all of your windows are open, and if you have smoke detectors, make sure all of those are switched off too. Because, as you can probably tell, our wok is smoking quite a bit. When you see smoke billowing off of that wok, that also means that it's billowing into your apartment too. So make sure those windows are open at this point. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, now that our wok is at a nice temperature, I'm going to add my cooking oil. So this is our bacon fat going in. And that is not quite enough fat to cook in, so I'm going to bolster that with a little bit of vegetable oil too. And then we're going to treat it the same way that you would treat any other cook. So we're going to do our long yao here. So this is, in Chinese cooking we call a long yao, which is essentially the process of coating your hot wok in cold cooking oil. And then we're going to start with our aromatics. So first up is our ginger, followed by our garlic, and the whites of our green onions. And we're going to let this go for just long enough until it's fragrant, so use your nose. That might be tricky because you're probably smelling a lot of bacon. If you're like me, I'm just smelling a lot of bacon right now. But usually that's about 10 to 15 seconds though. Oh, you hear mosquitoes. Check, check. Check, check. Mosquitoes. I think that's okay. I think we're okay. Let me know if the mic is crapping out. Alright, so next up I'm starting with my chicken going in next. You'll notice that I'm holding back as much of my marinade as possible. We want to avoid as much of that liquid going into the wok, so I didn't actually manage to hold that much back. But there's a decent amount of marinade that we held back. And that's just to make sure that we reduce the amount of liquid that builds up in our wok here. So the more moisture that we have in our wok, the more quickly that wok is going to start cooling down. So in our effort to make sure that we have as much heat in our wok as possible, we want to try and make sure that we keep as much moisture out as possible. No mosquitoes here. Oh yeah, cool. Thank you. Let me know if the mic starts crapping out. If you're watching on Reddit, the mic I'm using on Reddit is a piece of junk, so it craps out all the time. David, yeah, you can hear me. Thank you. Yeah, over on YouTube, there's nicer mics on YouTube, so it seems to work okay. Also, another good reason to hop over to YouTube if you're not watching over there already too. Nicer mics and nicer cameras over on YouTube. Alright, so we're going to let this go. This will probably go for maybe another minute, probably another 2 minutes. We don't need the chicken to be fully cooked through. We do need it to be mostly cooked through though. So I'm looking for like 85–90% cooked. And then we're going to finish, the rest of that cook is going to happen in the wok fry with everything else going on in it too. It's almost there. What's my favorite steak cut? I think my favorite steak cut, like everyday steak cut, is probably a New York strip, which I think is like the biggest bang for your buck. My favorite to eat is a filet mignon, but it's really expensive, so I don't think I've ever bought a filet mignon, at least not in the grocery store, because it's so expensive. That or Wagyu. A lot of liquid, yeah, good point. So that's a good thing to point out. So there is definitely a lot of liquid building up in our chicken here. And that's because there's a lot of marinade going, a lot of liquid in the marinade. So you can see at the bottom, there's a lot of liquid that has happened there. What we're doing right now is how you combat that buildup of liquid. So what I just did is I just removed everything from the wok. And this is in wok cooking, a process that we call batch cooking, which is essentially cooking certain elements, then removing it, and then cooking our next element. So that high presence of moisture that's building up in the wok, that's just coming from the fact that we just added a whole bunch of bacon fat, which is all liquid. The biggest problem with moisture buildup in a wok is that as it builds up, it's going to cause the temperature of the wok to cool down. So Hermina asked earlier about using chicken thigh versus chicken breast. So the reason that I don't like using chicken thigh in this recipe is because there is already quite a bit of fat to contend with already. So all of that moisture buildup that's going on in our wok cook already. So we could take a look while that wok is reheating. All of this moisture that's building up here, so that's a combination of a couple of things. The main thing that it's coming from is buildup of fat from the bacon fat that we were cooking in. It's also a combination of other things though, so there's also some fat that's coming out from our chicken breast, which is lean, but it also has some fat that renders out. And the other thing that's coming out is also moisture from, what was I going to say? Also, there's a lot of moisture that comes out from just from the cooking oil that we added to. So all of that results in all of this moisture that's building up down here. It's not a problem in a fried rice to add that moisture because it's all flavor. We definitely want to keep that moisture. But the biggest problem with that moisture in a wok cook is if you leave it in the wok, it's going to start that wok to. So I think someone just Ahun's just asked, does it steam out? So what happens is if you leave that moisture in the wok, it's going to start steaming, and that's how you get like a mushy fried rice, which is not attractive. We don't ever want a mushy fried rice. We never want our wok to be steaming. That's like a bad situation to be in if you're wok cooking. So in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, what we do is we remove it from the wok, and then we employ a process that you use in a lot of home wok cooking, which is called batch cooking. So we're going to remove it from the wok, and then we're going to cook our next ingredients. So the next couple of ingredients are carrots and our rice. So we're going to do our carrots and rice next, and then we're going to add the chicken, add this chicken mix back to the wok, and then we're going to toss everything together at that point. So what we get at the end of the day, what we get is that everything is being cooked at a very, very high heat. So we have to cook it in batches to make sure that the wok stays at that high heat. But by cooking it in batches, we can make sure that everything is cooked at extremely high heat. And then the only time where everything is in the wok at once is at the very, very end when we're pretty much just tossing to combine. The last thing that we're going to do today, which I normally don't do in a wok fry, is we're going to move everything back over to a cast iron pan at the very, very end. And we're going to sear the bottom of our fried rice at the very end after we're finished cooking. And that's how we're going to get that crispy fried rice. Usually down, you have a cheap wok that always sticks even with a lot of oil. My main question is what is the wok made out of? If it's sticking, I'm guessing it's not a non-stick wok, which probably means that so my wok is very cheap. So this wok, the wok that I'm cooking on was I think $10. I got it at a restaurant supply store. It is extremely cheap, and when I first bought it, everything stuck to it. Like literally anything that I cooked, freaking garlic would stick to it. Which like, how does garlic stick to a pan? And that's because a cheap wok is essentially just a piece of carbon steel. That's really all it is. It's just a raw piece of carbon steel. You can even see the raw edges of this wok too, if you look closely. This is literally, so if I move the pot handle, you can see this is literally just the raw edge of the cast carbon steel. And so like a cheap wok is really just a piece of carbon steel. There's nothing else to it. Unlike a frying pan, which has like a thick bottom, and that's what like creates heat retention in a frying pan. A cheap wok is really just a piece of carbon steel. which means that like we have to do a couple of things to make sure that stuff doesn't stick to it. The main thing that's really important about making sure a wok doesn't stick is just seasoning it. And the way that the best way that I've found of seasoning a wok is just cooking on it a lot. And that's like been my go-to, like the only way that I've ever been able to make sure that this wok doesn't stick is just start cooking on it a lot. And definitely like the first, like, I want to say almost 10 fries that I did on my wok, everything stuck to it. And it was like super frustrating because no matter what I cooked, I would be like freaking cooking just garlic and ginger and stuff would stick to it. But over the course of like maybe, I'd say like maybe 8 to 10 fries, I think, stuff stopped sticking to it over the course of just the course of cooking on it and seasoning it. The other thing that helps season is doing your long yao properly. So make sure that your wok is cold, or make sure that your wok is very hot, and then add your cooking oil to it and give it a good swirl, and that's going to help season too. So make sure that you're doing that long yao properly. So we could actually do that now, almost. That long yao is super important to making sure that your wok isn't sticky, which is essentially preheating your wok, which is what we're doing right now, and then adding your cooking oil to that preheated wok and giving that whole wok a coat. And then once that, by the process of coating your hot wok in cold cooking oil, it creates that non-stick surface for you, in addition to the seasoning. Is there any reason why you would want something to stick to a pan? No, absolutely not. It's never attractive. We never want stuff to stick to our wok. But yeah, getting stuff to not stick, it's all about the seasoning. Just make sure that it's seasoned properly, and make sure that you do your long yao properly. Alright, so I'm looking for a little bit more heat. I had my fire at low earlier because I was talking, so I'm going to let this heat a little bit more. And that ought to do it. And then we're going to add just a little bit of cooking oil. We don't need a lot because there's quite a bit of fat in our chicken that we're going to be adding back. So this is maybe 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil going in. And this is the long yao I'm talking about. So in Chinese cooking, we call it the long yao, which is essentially adding cold oil to a hot wok and give it a swirl. Make sure that everything is coated in that vegetable oil. And that's a big part of both seasoning and also making sure that nothing sticks to it. All right, so first up in our second batch fry is our carrots going in first. And I'm going to give this a toss. Just a little bit of a head start before our rice goes in. Would I do the same thing on a carbon steel frying pan? Yeah, exactly the same thing. I've never done a long yao on a carbon steel frying pan, but I would treat it exactly the same though, as far as seasoning goes. Or similar to how you would treat a cast iron pan, which is pretty much the same thing as a wok. When we're done cooking, I will also walk through how to clean, or like proper wok care and how to clean a wok too. Same for the cast iron pan too, we use both. All right, it's looking good. So for our carrots, I'm not looking for these to be completely cooked. I'm just trying to cook off some of the rawness of these carrots. And next up going in is some rice. This is very old rice. I think this was cooked on Monday or Tuesday. So it is very stale rice. That is super important about a proper fried rice, is that you have to have stale rice. You can't do a fried rice with fresh rice because if you had fresh rice in a wok, what you would be adding to that fresh rice, to the wok with that fresh rice, is a bunch of steam. So the same principles that make rice like nice and fluffy are things that are going to cause problems in your wok fry because you're essentially adding a whole bunch of moisture when you add fresh rice. So it's got to be old rice. It's got to be day old, maybe a couple days old even. Oops, just made a mess. All right. So I'm adding my rice next, and then I'm going to add my chicken back, along with quite a bit of moisture, which is all our bacon fat. And then the last two things that we have left to add are our sauce and our eggs. So before we add the sauce, I'm going to clear some space in the wok here. I'm going to add a little bit more oil here. And we're going to add our eggs next. So our eggs going in. We're making sure that those eggs make nice solid contact with our wok here. We want that eggs to be cooking on the wok surface. So if we're doing our best to make sure that those eggs don't come into contact with our other foods, at least for this time being, so that we can develop nice curds of egg here. And then once we start seeing egg curds forming, then we can start letting that mix in. And then I'm finishing all of this off with our sauce. So what I like doing is reserving the last maybe tablespoon, maybe a quarter cup of sauce to make sure that we don't over season here. And then only add that last quarter cup if you absolutely need it. And I think we do need it, so I'm going to add it. Or maybe not all of it. Oh, my mic is glitching again. That's fun. Check, check. I think it just goes in and out. Or maybe it's my elbow running into it. It might be my elbow running into it. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to add is some frozen peas. So the frozen peas, very, very important that they're frozen. We don't want to use canned peas. And that's because these peas, they're literally coming out of the freezer. So they actually have chunks of ice on them already, or still. And that's super, super important because we want those peas to start defrosting in the wok heat. If they are already defrosted, you're going to go from crispy peas to mushy peas. So what we're looking for here is actually frozen peas going into crispy peas. Need all of the sauce. All right. Oh, the mic is good now. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. I think it just comes in and out. Or it might also be my elbow running into it. All right. So next up, what I'm going to do is we're removing our fried rice here. This is actually not a serving bowl because we're going to finish it in another pan first. But before we finish it, over on the stove, we're going to do a couple things at the same time here. So over on the stove, I have my cast iron pan. It is preheating on my side burner. Now on the main burner. We're getting this cast iron pan back up to temperature. It still has even a little bit of bacon fat in it. While that's going on, the last thing that we want to do as soon as you pull your wok out of the fry is clean it. So super, super important. While your wok is ripping hot, clean it first. So run through how to clean this wok while this pan heats up. You'll notice there's even a little bit of stuff stuck here. That's all egg. That's okay because it will come right off with the back of the spoon. So we're just scraping some of that off. Don't use any abrasives. Just use the cooking utensil. So wooden. And that's all going to come off with a little bit of water. Super, super important to do this process while the wok is still hot. Because if you let that wok cool down and then try and clean it, you're going to have a lot of stuff stuck to that wok, and then you're going to have a bad time. That's definitely a world that we don't want to be in when we have to start scraping stuff off of the wok. It's because in order to get that stuff off, when you start scraping stuff off of a wok, the other thing that you're scraping off is wok seasoning. So the thing that's making your wok non-stick, that's part of what you're going to be scraping off. So when you start using things like sponges and Brillo pads, steel wool, stuff like that, what you're doing is scraping off the seasoning, the non-stick seasoning that you have. So that's never good. So do yourself a favor, clean that wok while it's still hot, and then you won't have to. I don't think I've actually scrubbed this wok in many months because pretty much every time that I finish cooking in it, I pull it out of the wok immediately, and then I reheat it and then clean it, which means essentially reheating the wok, and then we're going to add a tiny bit of oil here, so maybe like a teaspoon of oil. And then this is the same way that you would treat a cast iron pan or a carbon steel pan too, is we're giving this a good swirl and then just coating the wok in that oil. And this is just going to prevent any kind of carbonizing to happen or like rusting, all of that stuff that we don't want to happen to a wok. Give it a good coat and that will keep it from rusting. All right. So over on the side burner, my cast iron pan is preheating again. And what we're going to do is add our finished fried rice here. We're going to be adding this to our cast iron pan. I think we're going to do it in 2 separate batches. And that's going to give us that nice crispy sear. So right now, you could even eat this right now. This would be pretty good already. But what I love doing is finishing it in that cast iron pan so we get that nice crisp bottom to the fried rice. The mic bend, yeah, it goes out whenever I bend down. That's probably because my elbow is running into it. Yeah, the frozen veggies, they defrost super quickly. I probably even added them a little bit too early because we still have to do the cast iron sear. But they will they will defrost within minutes. So you could throw them in. You could even throw them in right before you serve them. You could even throw them in at this point, and they would still defrost in time. I've also seen a lot of fried rices done with like a mixed frozen mixed veggie. So you could do it with like a combination of frozen peas and carrots. You could even use frozen corn. Any kind of frozen veggie, it will work. As long as it's frozen, because you will have that nice crisp quality to the veggies that you wouldn't be able to get if it was fresh. So I've definitely done this many times with canned peas, and it doesn't work because the peas are already pretty crispy in the can. So they're like frozen canned peas are not terrible if you use it in like soups and stuff. But when you throw them into stir fries, though, they pretty much just start falling apart because you're trying to cook a already cooked element. So since they're already frozen, basically they just start defrosting in the pan. All right. So back over on the stove, my cast iron pan is nice, a little bit hotter. And there's also a little bit more junk in here than I'd like, so I'm going to rinse this out. That was making me a little nervous. We had some burnt stuff going on, so I'm going to rinse that out and then reheat it one more time. Won't the rice stick to the cast iron? Good question. It won't stick as long as you have a good cast iron. This only works if you have a good cast iron. So your cast iron has to have a nice non-stick seasoning to it. So if you're trying to use a cast iron that has not been seasoned yet, it will definitely stick, and that's going to be a big problem. So my cast iron pan, this cast iron is a cast iron that I've been cooking on for like 3 years now, maybe. It is non-stick enough to the point where I can fry an egg on it. So if your cast iron pan is good, non-stick enough that you can fry an egg on it, then you can do this fried rice on it. If it is not non-stick, if you don't have a non-stick seasoning to it, it will for sure stick. And I have totally stuck plenty of fried rices to plenty of frying pans before I figured out how to do this. So you want to make sure that this works on the pan that you're using it. You want to make sure it has a non-stick surface. I have toyed around with it on many stainless steel pans, and everything sticks to the stainless steel pans that I've used. So I've also tried to do it in the wok before too. In the wok, it doesn't work either. It only works in a cast iron pan that has a good non-stick seasoning to it. Good question though. Alright, so my cast iron pan is real hot. I'm going to add a little bit of oil here. Again, not too much, maybe a tablespoon, maybe a little bit less than that even. Just enough to get a little bit of a seasoning going. And then we're going to add, this is going to be half of our fried rice here. And I'm just making sure that we have as much of the surface area of the pan touching some fried rice as possible. And that's going to give us that nice sear. And then what we're going to do is we're going to let that go for a full 3 minutes. So in order for it to sear, you have to not move it for 3 minutes. I promise that it's not burning, or technically it is burning, but it's a good kind of burning. So don't move it, it will work, I promise. Just don't touch it. Yeah, why do you sear it? Good question. So you don't have to sear it. You could even eat the fried rice right now and it's totally edible. Everything's cooked. And it's also really tasty too. This is essentially just a normal fried rice. I love searing fried rice because you can get a nice crispy bottom to it. So the same way that you would treat a seared steak, so like a seared pork chop or a seared New York strip steak, when you sear it, you get a nice crisp bottom to it. And that's that bit that's like nice and crunchy, so like the end cut of a steak. That's what's happening is it's seared. So we can do the same thing for our fried rice by essentially adding it to the pan and then not moving it. But it has to be a cast iron pan that has a very, very high heat potential. So it has to be a pan that can retain a lot of heat, like a cast iron pan. So you can't do that in a wok because a wok is not going to retain enough heat to do this. If we were to try to do this in a wok with this much stuff in the wok would pretty much just drop in temperature and then you would have no heat in that wok. And then you would essentially just start steaming the rice, which is going to end up being like mushy. But if you do it in a pan that has really, really high heat retention, like this cast iron pan, it will hold all of that heat together, and then you can get a really, really crispy rice. Am I using leftover rice? Yeah, so this is maybe more than a day old. I think this was, I did this rice on Tuesday. What did we cook? Whenever we did oh, maybe it was yesterday. So if you're, this is a good point. If you've ever followed these streams before, anytime that I cook fried rice, the day before, so whatever happened on the stream before is probably something that involved rice. So yesterday we did a Beijing beef, which is like a seared or a deep fried steak stir fry. Today we're doing fried rice because what we're eating is the leftover rice from yesterday's Beijing beef. Good question though, yeah. Always, anytime that you're cooking fried rice, it's got to be leftover. Otherwise, you're going to be steaming a lot of rice. All right, so we're at 2.5 minutes. This is usually around the time where when I'm searing stuff, I start getting really nervous and thinking that it might be burning. But it's also the most critical 30 seconds. This is where all of that searing is going to happen. So try and calm down. I promise it's not burning. It's just searing. All right. This way. There we go. All right, that's 3 minutes. Let's move it. And then we have, so you can see at the bottom, everything that was touching that cast iron pan, it is nice and crisp here. Some people might call that burnt. What I call it is seared. Searing is technically a form of burning, I suppose. All right, so I'm pulling this out. And then we're going to do the other half of our fried rice. Again, a tiny little bit of oil, no more than a tablespoon. That might even be a little bit less than a tablespoon. Just enough to do our sear in. And then we're adding the remainder of our rice. And just like the first batch, we're making sure as much of that rice is coming into contact with the pan as possible, so that we have as much surface area that is searing as possible. And again, we're going to let that go for another 3 minutes. How very sweet. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Yeah, I'm always happy to give in-depth answers as much as I can. I don't know everything about wok frying, but at any time that I can give an in-depth answer. So real quick, we could take a look at our finished fried rice. So we have these nice bits of crispy fried rice. So we could take a look. Autofocus, we have autofocus on. So all of those nice darkened bits, that all is coming from the sear. All right, cool. You don't have a cast iron, you have one, but it's stuck like crazy. Yeah, so that's cast iron pan. Same thing with a wok. Just keep using it, and over the course of time, it will stop sticking, as long as it's made out of a good form of cast iron. Neither of my pans are expensive. My carbon steel wok, I think it was like literally $10 from a restaurant supply store, and I think this cast iron is like a Food Network cast iron, like the Rachel Ray Food Network cast iron pan, something like that, for like $25 or something. And the only reason that it works so well is because I've cooked in it a lot. Like that pan is probably getting close to like 200-300 meals at this point. So. Eat it. Yeah, we're almost there. Let's finish cooking first. You can't. Yeah, definitely. Let me know if you try the searing technique. It's one of my favorites. This is one of my favorite ways of preparing fried rice. Is giving it a sear first. All right, 30 seconds. Hello to everyone just tuning in. I'm going to give a quick introduction one more time. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we're cooking a cast iron seared fried rice, which I love doing. As like the final finish to a fried rice because you get a nice crispy bottom to it. If this is your first time tuning in, we're streaming Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. and Fridays I've got new recipes out over on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't caught what's going on over on the YouTube channel, if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. Thank you for being there. Lots of fun stuff going on over there, including all of the recipe videos for pretty much everything that I cook on stream, including this fried rice. So all of those recipe videos, they live over on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking to reproduce the things that I'm cooking, all of those things live over there. And there's lots of fun content going on, including the recipes for this fried rice. In addition to all of those recipe videos, that's also where the schedule of live streams lives. So if you're looking for what I'm going to be cooking next, that all lives over on my YouTube channel. So if you're looking for that, that's youtube.com/woocancook. If you were watching over there, lots of people are watching over there, you would have known a couple of weeks ago, I think probably back in probably last month I announced this. So all of that stuff, it lives over on the YouTube channel, and you can find all that information over there. We have a couple of different series that are going on right now. My favorite right now is probably the Chinese American food series, in which we have been deconstructing a lot of Chinese American classics and kind of taking a look at what makes Chinese American food so American. And like things like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, a lot of stuff from Panda Express and P.F. Chang's, things like that. And kind of taking a look at what those things are and like what makes them American. So. And then removing those American qualities and then applying like an understanding of traditional Chinese wok cooking and taking a look at what Chinese American food would look like if it was authentically Chinese. So, which is always super interesting with stuff like honey sesame chicken or like kung pao chicken, because most of those things are pretty much just American food and like reassembled in the American palate. So always very interesting. So my favorite is we did a tempura fried sesame chicken, which is sesame chicken is just American fried chicken with a honey glaze, and we did it with a tempura batter and sweet chili sauce, which is really good. So if you're interested in content like that, hop over to the YouTube and check out what's going on over there. We're working our way to 2,300 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit the subscriber goal, lots of fun stuff going on over there, including all of the recipe videos that come up on stream. All right. So I'm finishing this with. Oh, cool. Yeah, you're subscribing now. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone who has already subscribed. There's lots of fun content going over on the YouTubes. Also, lots of people are already watching too. So I also have heard that the cameras work better over there too. So you see stuff freezing on the Reddit. Cool. That ought to do it. So I'm finishing these. These are the greens of my green onions, and we're just about there. Ooh, this new bowl looks nice. Cool. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you all for tuning in. Real quick, we can also run how to clean this cast iron pan. So we're going to do the exact same thing that I just did with the wok. Is I just gave it a quick rinse in the sink. I did not scrub this at all. You'll notice that it is already quite clean. And that's because all I did was I gave it a rinse in the sink. And that rinse pretty much just took everything that had stuck to it off. So there was a little bit of rice that was stuck, probably a little bit of bacon fat sticking to it. And if your pan is seasoned properly, all of that stuff, it just comes right off. And that's the world that we want to be in with carbon steel and cast iron. We don't want to be scrubbing stuff off of your cast iron and carbon steel stuff. Because when you start scrubbing stuff, I just said this with our wok too, but when you start scrubbing stuff off of the wok and off of the carbon steel, that's when you start scrubbing off the seasoning too, which is never good. So I'm just coating this in a little bit of oil, and that is it. Cool. This bowl looks nice. Yeah. Cool. Thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, people keep asking me to try it. I don't want to mess up the plate. I'm going to try from here. Yeah, super tasty. I love this fried rice. This is one of my favorite fried rices. It's like super classic. The flavors that are involved are really, really classic flavors. So like that hoisin, soy sauce, and sambal, that's like a really, really fundamental classic combination of sauces. And then like that crispy quality to the fried rice is like really the thing that kind of makes it pop. Is that like nice crispy fry that really like gives you a nice bite to it. And it also adds a little bit of like flavor because of that Maillard reaction. And definitely a lot of that bacon fat is punching through quite a bit too. So one of my absolute favorite fried rices. It's also really, really simple. It kind of took us a while to cook it because I was talking a lot. But honestly, when I've done this fried rice without filming it, probably takes me like 20 minutes. You can also, if you don't own a wok, you can do the whole thing in a cast iron pan. I used to do it in a cast iron pan entirely. And you might make a little bit more of a mess if you're trying to toss in a cast iron. But for the most part, you can do it entirely in one pan too if you don't want to make a mess. Yeah. Cool, I think that covers it. Thank you all for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If you haven't hopped over yet, definitely pop over to the YouTube and check out what's going on over there. We've been pushing out new recipe videos that's coming out every Friday. There have been new recipe videos every Friday, I think, since August, July or August, almost like half a year now at least. New recipe videos, those are every Friday, including the recipe for this fried rice. And then we're streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. New recipes every Friday. Lots of fun content coming up soon. If you're looking for the schedule for what I'm going to be cooking next, that's all over on the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/woocancook. If you had been watching on YouTube, you would have known probably 3 weeks ago or so that I would be cooking this. So I know lots of people have started following over on YouTube. And over on that schedule, that's also where the ingredient list lives. So if you want, you can pick up the things that are going into the fried rice and then cook along with me, which I know some people have started doing. Always more fun to cook with other people because then we can talk about all the things that we messed up. If you're cooking by yourself, then you just kind of have to like live with the mistakes that you've made and like just live with your life, which is less fun. I know I make mistakes when I cook pretty much all the time.
The only difference is that I get better at recovering from the mistakes that I make.
Today, I made the mistake of adding the eggs too late.
Almost every time I make a mistake, and it's totally normal. So, all right, thank you all for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Be sure to hop over, check out the YouTube channel. There's a fun series. Oh yeah, we've been doing this Chinese American food series, pretty much 5 or 6 recipes now, 7, 8 recipes. Kind of deconstructing a lot of Chinese food that are like really classic Chinese American foods that live or like come up in a lot of Chinese American food cuisine. This Friday, so tomorrow, we're releasing the P.F. Chang's Mongolian beef, which is going to be really interesting because we're going to take a look first how you would like do a Mongolian beef in like a really Americanized style and like using like really Americanized ingredients, which is basically like less ingredients. And then I took a second shot at like what a more traditionally Chinese Mongolian beef looks like, and kind of like compared the two. What does it look like? What are the things that were changed when those things were introduced to Chinese American foods, and like how was Chinese American food adjusted to the American palate? So, if you're interested in stuff like that, hop over to the YouTube, check out what's going on over there. We're working our way to 2,300 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that goal, hop over and check out what's going on over there. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you all for tuning in and like continually coming back all the time. It's always super exciting to see so many people tuning in all the time. I see a lot of familiar faces. I know I've seen Amina and David both come up in that chat all the time. Bing is Bong, I know I've seen you. A lot of people on the Reddit stream that I recognize. So thank you all for tuning in all the time. This is super fun. Delaware Smash, yeah, thank you. How very sway, also a really good username. Lots of fun usernames on Reddit. Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Lots of fun stuff coming up soon. So yeah, if you haven't checked it out, hop over to YouTube, check out what's going to go on over there. I'll be around doing dishes, so if I missed any questions, feel free and pop your questions in the chat. And I'll see you soon. All right, thanks everyone. What are we cooking next? Monday we're doing, we're doing Mongolian beef. The next stream that's happening is on Monday next week, and we're going to be doing the Mongolian beef from P.F. Chang. So we're going to be cooking through the recipe that's coming out on Friday. So Friday will be the recipe for Mongolian beef, and then Monday will be the live stream for Mongolian beef. All right, I'll see you soon.
nothing really suits me. You're my life, I can feel it still. Might have had your fill, I can feel it still.
The club isn't the best place to find the lovers, so the bar is where I go. Me and my friends sat at the table doing shots, drinking fast, and then we talk slow. Come over and start up a conversation with just me, and trust me, I'll give it a chance. So now take my hand, stop, and the man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance. And now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Well, come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. Say, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. Last night you were in my room. Now my bedsheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. 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 Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. When we can, we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up a plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour and how your family's doing okay. And leaving, getting a taxi, kissing the backseat, tell the driver make the radio play. And I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. Say, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. Push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. Last night you were in my room. Now my bedsheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. 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 Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. Come on, be my baby. Come on, 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 come on, be my baby. Come on.